It must be incredible for you to come from Wall Street to basically your living history. Your predecessor, the very first Treasury Secretary, was, of course, Alexander Hamilton, the original tariff man. Are there echoes in his career in what you're doing today?
Alexander Hamilton set up the financial system for the U.S. government. But before then, it was this loose alliance, and a lot of state issued money. There were banks. There was no central bank. It all happened in Alexander Hamilton's head.
Right.
It's incredible.
Brilliant.
And one of the things that happened in his head was this idea of tariffs. And he did it for two reasons. One, to finance the Treasury. So the U.S. government used to be solely financed by tariffs, sole form of revenues. And then two, to protect nascent U.S. industries from the British, from the French, because he was trying to develop an industrial base. And as I always say, President Trump has added a third leg to the tariff stool, and that's negotiations. So he uses tariffs for leverage. So he's using it to raise revenues. He's using it for our industry, and he's also using it for negotiations, which is very powerful, very powerful. So last 2 weeks ago today, I was in the Fox green room, and the president announced that he was thinking of putting a 50% tariff on the European Union.
Right.
And the European Union is very difficult to negotiate with. There's 27, 28 members. They have a collective action problem. The Germans care about cars. The French care about agriculture.
Right.
I'm not sure what the Spanish care about, but it's the old Henry Kissinger saying, when I call Europe, who do I call?
Right.
And Ursula von der Leyen was not really coming forward in terms of a tariff negotiation. So once the president threatened to put on a 50% tariff, 4, 5, 6 of the European state leaders called him, and then he was on the phone with her within 48 hours, and the Europeans have started moving forward.
We were told when Donald Trump upended world trade with all these tariffs that we were going to have a recession, that inflation was going to soar. Has that happened?
Well, Miranda, I call it TDS, and a lot of people think that's Trump derangement syndrome.
Right.
It's tariff derangement syndrome.
Right, the next stage.
The next stage.
Yeah.
A lot of Democrats are in favor of tariffs, but now that President Trump is leading the charge, they can't be. And so they call them the Trump tariffs. And that all these predictions have just been baseless and a flop, and nobody wants to admit it. Nobody wants to admit it. The CPI, the PPI were both 0.1% last month. And we had, which was the cumulative was the best number since 2020. And the month before that was the best number since 2021. We haven't had a recession. As a matter of fact, the economy is very strong. Household income growth was 0.7 or 0.8% in April for 1 month. That's out of the park. Blue collar wage growth, the only other time it's been this high, wait for it, was during President Trump's first term. So we've seen real wages for hourly workers, non-supervisory workers, rise almost 2% in the first 5 months.
And why is that?
It's the president's emphasis on manufacturing. I think there's also likely a component of whether it's 12 or 20 million illegal aliens coming out of the workforce. And Joe Biden opened the border and it was flooded. And that for working Americans, that's a disaster because it's pressure on their wages.
And so blue collar wage growth went down during Biden.
It did.
And it's back up again just in a few months.
In 5 months.
5 months.
5
wow.
months.
That's amazing. You've just been named the most popular Treasury Secretary in history. What's the secret, and what's your relationship like with Donald Trump?
The secret is following President Trump's lead.
Right.
Because he has incredible instincts. I am fortunate that his knowledge of the economy, his instinct, we haven't had a president like this for over 100 years, maybe ever. Someone who comes from the business community, who wants to do deals, and he's reconstituted the Republican Party. You have the richest people in America from Silicon Valley on one side, And then 2 weeks ago tonight, I was in Pittsburgh with President Trump at a U.S. steel plant. And it was incredible. Incredible. The steel workers and the warmth and his feelings for them, their feelings for him. Those were working class Democrats. And not anymore. He realizes that we have strategic industries that were slipping away from us. Like steel, semiconductors, pharmaceuticals, we got to bring them back home. Again, it's back to President Trump has reconstituted the best parts of the Republican Party, and it's for everybody. It's not the country club anymore. It's not big business, but it's pro-business, but with an eye on working American. When China came into the WTO, there's something called the China shock. And working Americans were just left on the side of the road. The Democrats took them for granted. The Republicans didn't think that they could get them. And on wages for working Americans, they're doing fantastic under President Trump.
You talked about the China shock. Do you think back in, I think 2001, when we allowed China to join the WTO and it has special advantages, do you think that people should have realized that it was going to be so damaging to American workers?
I think they should have realized that there should have been better guardrails. Oh, is that actually Larry Fink, the head of BlackRock, said that we had capitalism without guardrails.
Right.
The U.S. economy got more and more financialized. The coastal elites were doing great. And then the middle of the country just got hollowed out. And the Democrats have this strategy called compensate the loser,
right,
which is just more benefits, more
welfare.
Welfare. We don't care what's happened to your community. I'm sure you've seen the same surveys that I have that say that would you be willing to pay a little more if your community was back to the way it was? And this gets mocked by orthodox, hardcore, free market right and by Democrats as being this nostalgic concept. We have 9% of the workforce is in manufacturing, and it's a fact that we get much stronger wage growth for the workers in manufacturing jobs than the service economy. The steel plant, the auto plant, the ball bearing plant has closed. Have at it at McDonald's. The
new posture, I guess, towards China now with Donald Trump. You just recently flew to London to have some pretty willing trade negotiations with the Chinese. And I think this was just over the sort of retaliatory measures that China had slapped on America. For instance, magnets and some rare earths they had put a ban on, and then we'd slapped some payback to them. And so did you manage to sort that out? And do you think that we're going to get to a point that Donald Trump has said he wants where China opens up to America?
Well, whether they'll open up, we'll see. On April 2nd, President Trump and the economic team gave out reciprocal tariffs for the world. And I think China's was maybe at 34% or something. And if you want to come negotiate, you can negotiate, but do not escalate. And the Chinese were the only ones to negotiate, escalate.
Right.
And then it turned into this tit for tat.
Yeah.
And then we were at 145% tariffs on them. They were at 125% on us, and which is effectively an embargo.
Yeah.
I believe that Chinese were feeling more pain. Their system takes pain better. But I believe it was probably very painful for them because that we import 3 times more than we sell to them. So we are the deficit country in the history of trade wars. The surplus country always takes more pain.
And their economy is not doing very well, is it, at the moment?
They're in the middle of a real estate downturn. Some might call it a crisis. Mm-hmm. They've had low growth. There's something called the middle income trap for developing economies. But what we will see with China is, can they be a reliable partner? So from COVID, we learned was that we have to bring back strategic industries to the U.S. Again, steel, semiconductors, medicines, some others. And we have been over-reliant on China and other countries, and we're bringing that back home. So I would call that a strategic decoupling. The idea of a generalized decoupling and the two largest economies not trading with each other is not a great thought. So the ball's in China's court. They buy more U.S. goods and services, allow us market access, because China's tariffs are only about 5%.
Right.
It's just the non-tariff barriers that are really tough. We gave them full access to our market. We have so many things on the shelves here that are Chinese products. So look, if they are in the mood to help rebalance trade with us, then we can do it together. And then if not, it's going to be choppy.
So what's your prediction then? How do you think it's going to go now? What's the next stage?
So we had a meeting in Geneva, May 11th and 12th, to bring down, basically end the embargo, 145%, 125% tariffs. We each brought them down 115. So we're at 30 that were put on this year, plus another 20 from President Trump's first term. So we're at 50, they're at 10. But what the Chinese had also done in April, they put on a series of non-tariff trade barriers, what they call countermeasures. And one of them was putting these rare earth magnets, which are it's this crazy little product that's in everything.
Yes.
It's in your iPhone. It's in your car.
But how scary that we're reliant on them for it.
I blame the past administration for letting this happen. And one thing that we're determined, the national security team, which I'm on, the national economic team that I'm on, we will not leave in 2028 without having solved many of these problems, all of these problems. We are not going to be held hostage or over a barrel. And the meeting in London was to establish, we were trying to take off the export control. So the magnets were not flowing as promised in Geneva. Right. Unclear how much was just a glitch in the Chinese system, which is a slow command and control. In the meantime, we had put some countermeasures on them. Some of them got publicity. We had embargoed aircraft engines, engine parts.
Grounded a few of their planes.
I think grounded a few of their planes. We were reviewing the visa status of Chinese students. We were withholding ethane, which is the base product for plastic. The idea is we agreed in London, magnets start flowing. We will take down our countermeasures, and then we'll probably have another in-person meeting again in 3 weeks to see if we can do this mutual rebalancing. It should be natural. President Trump wants the U.S. to manufacture more and become a manufacturing powerhouse for precision manufacturing again. They're 30% of global manufacturing now. Which is too high, and it can't go higher. So the way for them is not to try to export their financial problems, is to switch to the consumption model. And if we could do that together, it'd be incredible.
And now Howard Lutnick is the Commerce Secretary, has been, I guess, put into this team with you. And I think it's part of Donald Trump's team of rivals philosophy, because there's been a lot of talk about you're both billionaires from Wall Street, some competition between you.
Marina, you know what I love? On the internet, I'm 6'8" and I have $5 billion. Neither one of those is correct. President Trump fills the right people with the right jobs with complementary skill sets. So I actually think that we work quite well together.
There are a few troubles at the beginning.
Some people in the cabinet knew each other quite well.
Yeah.
Secretary Lutnick, Howard, and I are both from the private sector. We've never been in government before.
Right.
So everyone's feeling their way around. But I tell you, the camaraderie in the cabinet's incredible. And think how transparent President Trump is in these meetings.
It's incredible.
The last one, if it went for 2.5 hours, all but 10 minutes was televised.
Yes.
President Biden didn't have a cabinet meeting for 10 months. If the cabinet wanted to invoke the 25th Amendment to remove him, they couldn't have, because they hadn't seen him.
Yeah. Elon Musk was a little bit of a thorn in the side, I think, for a few of the cabinet members, including you. And I asked President Trump about the famous stoush between you and Elon Musk, where there was a shouting match outside his office, and Elon Musk reportedly shoved you. Is that true?
We have had disagreements, but we both want to eliminate the waste, fraud, and abuse in government. The Silicon Valley mode of operation is move quickly and break things. I always say here at Treasury, we move deliberately and fix things. I think Elon's probably fancies himself more of a Viking. I think I'm more of a ninja who through the submarine surfaces, fires, goes back under. Look, everybody's very passionate about doing the best job for President Trump and the American people.
Did you call him a total fraud?
Absolutely not.
And he said that he was going to save $1 trillion. Is that in spending? I mean, how did we get the spending under control, I guess, if Doge can't do it?
Elon set the pace, and Doge is a movement. Look, he was vilified by the press, by the Tesla customers, and I think...
And that probably put stress on him.
Oh, I would have been.
Yeah.
The personal safety, domestic terrorist attacks on Tesla vehicles, it was insane.
Yeah.
And I think in a way that the base that he's set and some of the people he's brought into government and the ethos. So I think of Doge as an ethos. Elon has departed physically. I think that ethos is there, and the momentum for what he's done will yield bigger and bigger savings over time.
He is right about the debt, though, isn't he? I mean, it is a train wreck ahead. At some point, is there any way of the debt ceiling obviously isn't working? Is there any way of dealing with the debt in our lifetime?
There are two ways to fix the debt. One, spend less, and we are getting spending under control. Whether it's the House bill or the Senate bill, we're probably going to cut 1.5 or $2 trillion of spending. And then through President Trump's trade policies, tax policies, and deregulation policies, we're going to grow faster. So what's really important is the debt to GDP. So we were left with a mess. It was 6.5, 6.7% deficit to GDP. So, imagine a household that's overspending by that much every year. And we're going to bring that down slowly. And I've said I'd like to see the deficit get back to something with a 3 in front of it by the end of the president's term in 2028. That's about the long-term average. And we don't have a revenue problem. We have a spending problem. And we are constraining the spending, and we're going to grow the economy. Nobody does that better than President Trump.
And in the budget, there's a measure to increase the amount of money that we put into the IMF. Is that a good, do you think it's enough? And why are we doing that?
We are going to give the multilateral development banks a chance. And I am in contact with the head of the IMF, the head of the World Bank. The Democrats just let them do what they wanted and let them create these green agendas, climate agendas, DEI agendas, and they just got so far off course. Republicans have never paid much attention to them because they didn't really like them. Nature may abhor a vacuum. The Chinese don't. So the Chinese have just moved into these institutions and are trying to take them as much of the global South, the BRICS. I gave a speech during IMF World Bank Week here in Washington, and I said, we're going back to basics. We're the largest shareholders. I'm optimistic that through capital contributions, we can leverage our shareholdings and then leverage our influence, but we're going to do it properly, and we're going to be in it to win it.
Let's talk about your career. You wanted to be a journalist, I think, at one point. But
this is journalist, computer scientist. I couldn't figure out which one. And
me too, by the way.
Really?
Yeah.
Well, journalism seems to have worked out, Miranda.
Yeah.
So,
yes, I'm happy I made that decision. Yeah.
And it turned out that investing suited me because it was a combination of quantitative and the computer side, and then journalism. Investing, a lot of it's really telling a story.
Right.
Researching, creating a narrative.
Back to your big job was to work for George Soros, who I guess he's like the bête noire of the MAGA movement. Yep. What's he like? And do you still talk to him?
No, I haven't spoken to him since 2016. George is very smart. For most of the time I was there, I was at Soros Fund Management twice. My real mentor is Stan Druckenmiller,
Right, yes.
who's most incredible
Genius.
investor in history, but also just like the best person. He cares about his family. But so I worked mostly for Stan, but interacted with George. And I'll tell you what George is really good at is figuring out how systems work, how they accelerate, and how they break down. And what we saw with what he did with the district, mainly the district attorneys. I was there until 2000, and George's political activities were really limited to helping bring down the Iron Curtain.
Right.
And very laudable.
Yes.
When I got there, what is now the notorious Open Society Foundation, I think it was 5. It was either 3 Hungarians, 2 Russians, 3 Hungarians. But they were sneaking, you can remember them, fax machines behind the Iron Curtain.
Oh, wow. So doing good work.
So that the dissidents could get the word out. And then by the time I came back in 2011, George was more politically polarizing, but it hadn't really accelerated. I don't know what it was.
And why the district attorneys? Why does he want to do that?
Oh, because what George is very good at is figuring out systems. And he figured out a lot of money in presidential politics, Senate, House races. But at the district attorneys, if you have a view of a different kind of America, those are easy races.
Yeah, cheap.
Cheap. So he went in and was able to get a lot of progressive candidates over the line, defund the police, decriminalize this, decriminalize that.
But that's been hugely destructive to the country and law and order. So why would he want that chaos?
He has a very different vision than I do, President Trump. But it's a vision that some people in America have. I'm not happy he did it, but shame on us. Shame on our movement for letting him do
allowing it to happen.
For allowing it to happen.
And now, one of the things you did, you were just 30 years old. You pulled off the biggest, I guess, trade in the history of 100 years
at the time.
At the time, yes, which was you broke the Bank of England. What made you think of that, and did you realize what you were really the enormity of it at the time?
Well, look, it was a group effort. My contribution. So it was Stan Druckenmiller had this idea that there's something called the exchange rate mechanism.
Yeah.
The pound was tied to the German mark. This is before the euro, and was trading in a band. So Stan had this idea that it might not stay in the band. My contribution was I was running the SFM office in London, and I was observing that there was a big property hangover after Margaret Thatcher, and there was something called the Lawson housing boom. And he had really gunned the economy to get Baroness Thatcher reelected. They really made working class Brits into homeowners. What I realized was the mortgage structure in the UK, very different than the US. In the US, we have 5, 10, 30-year mortgages. In the UK, at the time, 90% of the mortgages moved up and down with the Bank of England's interest rate. So if the Chancellor raised rates on Wednesday, your mortgage went up on a Friday.
Right.
So you had no certainty. As we went in and started selling pounds and buying Deutschmarks, the surefire way to chase away a currency speculator is to make it expensive.
Yeah.
Bank of England, the British government, were raising interest rates, and they kept raising rates and raising rates. We'll take a little bit of short-term pain, but they will bankrupt all the new homeowners that they have in the country, which they did. They created a property crisis.
Right.
And so eventually the British government had to say, uncle, they came out of the exchange rate mechanism.
And you guys made $1 billion.
In a day.
In a day?
In a day.
Wow.
Yep.
Bit of champagne popped that night?
Well, it was a good day.
Yeah.
Good day.
President Trump, I think, is probably, to use George W. Bush's word, the most misunderestimated president we've had. Do you see the method in what he does? To me, he's sort of operating on a number of different levels. It's not all chaos and craziness.
In game theory, which I've studied a lot, there's something called strategic uncertainty. President Trump creates a lot of strategic uncertainty. He creates a lot of optionality. The biggest misunderstanding about him is his love for people. He regards himself as the mayor of America, and he cares deeply about the 330 million Americans. We were taking an action at Treasury, and I said, well, sir, this may result in 300 layoffs. It's up to you to find jobs for those people. When we were at that rally in Pittsburgh with the steel workers, I was fortunate enough to be with him the last night of his campaign in Pittsburgh, and then on to Grand Rapids, which he didn't finish till 3 a.m.
Yeah, amazing.
But it was incredible. Like the steel workers are there. They got their hats. They got their vests. They got their families. They believe in him. And it's not a conventional strategy. But like, what conventional person ever done great things? Does anybody think that Winston Churchill was conventional?
No.
He's also so flexible. We've just spent basically the past 24 hours in the Situation Room over the Iran-Israel conflict. I can tell you that the American people should know, and the American troops should know, that Donald Trump is doing an incredible job looking after their interest. Without someone like him could turn into a widespread conflict that soldiers and interests could get sucked into.
That's comforting to know. For you, your legacy, what do you hope to achieve at the end of your 4 years?
That's a very good question, because at Treasuries, there's so much to do every day. If you were to look at the kind of statutory responsibilities of the Treasury Secretary, I'm also oversee the Social Security Trust Fund, Sovereign Wealth Fund. Assume that I will walk out of the building in January of 2029. What are the 3 to 5 things? Stabilize the U.S. finances and put that on a good trajectory that will make sure that we have another great 250 years. Bring back and make sure that Main Street and Wall Street have both done well. Because Wall Street's had a great run. Now it's Main Street's turn to also participate. Wall Street Journal accused me of some kind of populist remarks. What's wrong with both doing well? Yeah. And then the third is, I think, to lock in the U.S. dollar as the reserve currency for many more generations. And I got lots of ideas that we're working on how to do that.
Because crypto, that seems to be a threat to the dollar, doesn't it?
I think it's the opposite.
Oh, really?
I think stable coins could reinforce dollar supremacy. Stable coins could end up being one of the largest buyers of U.S. treasuries or T-bills.
And is that why it was crucial that Donald Trump get involved in crypto rather than trying to constrain it like Joe Biden was?
I think constrain's too mild a word. I think make it extinct.
Oh.
So this administration's commitment to digital assets, it's innovation, because there's so many other things that happen around digital assets. So once we get this bill passed, the U.S., we can put our best standards and practices out to the world. Right? It won't be something that happens in a Caribbean island.
Is there something that you see in people that makes you think that they're going to be successful?
Love of the game. Michael Jordan would have a great basketball game, and most basketball players have in their contract that they can't play for fun. He had a love of the game clause. So he would actually go out and shoot baskets afterwards.
Really?
Or he would play on weekends. In my investment business, I would always try to tell, do you dream about the currency markets? Do you dream about the stock market? Are you always trying to find a new angle to make money? So it's like love of the game.
All consuming. Yeah. And parenting tips. Donald Trump is a great father, obviously, because he's got such a good relationship with his adult kids. Do you have parenting tips?
Time. There's nothing makes up for time. Help them find what's the game they love.
Yes.
What's the game they love? My son just started rowing, and it's changed his life.
Really?
Changed his life.
My son's rowed as well. It's an amazing discipline.
Amazing discipline. That we were together over the Christmas break, and he was in kind of his athletic gear.
Yeah.
And I said, "Where are you going?" He goes, "No, I've already been to the gym. I was there at 6."
Oh, wow. How old is he?
15.
That's amazing.
That was amazing. I said, will the alien who's stolen my son please return him? Actually, I kind of like this son.
Yes.
So
that's wonderful.
But, he found what he liked.
Isn't that great?
Yeah. And same with my daughter.
Right. Well, thank you so much for your time.
No,
and
thank you.
I know you're incredibly busy, but we really appreciate it.